many people that are living in poverty, the estimate is that about 35 to 50% of kids in Missouri have been exposed to some kind of trauma by the time they reach the age of 6, and that 2/3 of all adults have had some kind of adverse childhood experience. Now, an adverse childhood experience, there's a diagram that I'll send you. They come from a variety of different sources, from external natural disasters, just experiences that everybody is facing that are no respecter of persons. They're just, whether it's a fire, a tornado, COVID-19, lots of different sources there from adverse childhood experiences. And then another aspect would be community. And we've experienced some of that as well lately with the police shootings and the protests that have followed. That's a big community event that could be considered an adverse experience, a traumatic experience, especially for people that are involved in that community directly. And then we also have family situations, and that's probably the one that's the most common, where we consider like domestic violence, child abuse as traumatic experiences. So there's these 3 different arenas where adverse childhood experiences can take place. And I also heard a statistic that about 50% of kids in Missouri are also on Medicaid. And I haven't done the research to see the intersecting points, but I'm sure that there's a lot of overlap between families that are in poverty, kids that are on Medicaid, and kids that, just as a marker, and those kids that have also been exposed to trauma at a very young age. What we also can assume, I believe, is that because of the number of adults that have had some kind of traumatic experience, it's estimated that 10% of people have experienced at least 4 or more, or 5 or more adverse childhood experiences. That's usually on a scale of like 1 to 10. And once you hit 4 to 5, that's usually when there's some health issues that occur, whether that's mental health, emotional health, physical health, even with stress and the impacts of that on the body. So with all of that in mind, I don't think it would be a stretch to say that we could assume that most of the clients that we engage with and serve at Love Inc. have had some kind of trauma in their background, either as a child that they had absolutely no control over, or as an adult that they've experienced or witnessed along the way. When we think about trauma, the way that we consider it, or the definition of trauma, I think is important. Trauma is any experience that overwhelms a person's ability to cope. It's defined as an event, a series of events or circumstances experienced by an individual that are physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, with lasting adverse effects on their well-being. That's a long definition. I just want to focus on 3 words there. The first is that it's an event. It can occur with either an actual or a perceived threat. So it doesn't have to mean that something actually happened, but it can be a perceived threat that something might happen. Maybe somebody who nearly drowned as a child, or felt like they were drowning. They didn't actually drown, they didn't have to be resuscitated, but they perceived that they were in danger. That can be a traumatic experience. It's also an experience of surrounding that event. And what that means is that it's been assigned meaning to it by the person that went through the traumatic event. So that person has assigned meaning to it, and that meaning may differ from person to person. And that also can differ based on the effects, and that's the last thing to focus on, is the lasting effect. You may have a family that was in a car accident, but one person has trauma that has a lasting effect on them, the other person doesn't. And it's not necessarily that the same event causes the same kind of trauma or traumatic experience for someone. It's how that person experienced it, and then what kind of lasting effect that might have on them later on. What meaning did they assign to that traumatic event? That certainly makes a big difference as to whether or not someone sees that as trauma, or whether or not that's an actual traumatic experience. Common traumatic experiences include feeling threatened, or feeling that a loved one is threatened, a sense of horror or helplessness, a sense of hopelessness, feeling like you're unable to prevent a situation, or that you're unable to intervene or protect a loved one. And you can imagine, as a child, of course, there are plenty of times where someone can feel helpless, but there are also chronic experiences of trauma that is important to note as well. We often tend to think of those experiences that result in like a PTSD diagnosis, for someone, but it's not always that point in time trauma. Sometimes it's a family that is living under the poverty level, and there's neglect, maybe because of substance use, maybe because a parent is working 2 jobs and is just not able to be physically present. But there's some chronic effects of trauma that also can have lasting impact on people as well, that don't always get labeled as trauma. We don't always necessarily think of that in the same way as someone who, witnessed the loss of their parents or was in a tragic accident. But at the same time, it can still have a lasting impact or lasting effect. Where I want to spend the majority of our time today is looking at the impact of trauma on the brain and how we can then relate to people in a way that takes into account how trauma impacts the way that their brain is responding to the situations that they're experiencing around them. I think this is one of the most surprising things that I've learned through the process, and one that offers some immediate help as we face situations with clients, or as clients are working through things that we are trying to help them navigate, and we don't always understand what's going on or why they might be reacting the way that they are. And the way that the brain responds to trauma is something that is really fascinating to look into. And if you have any questions along the way, I'm just going to keep rolling through unless somebody pipes in. So feel free anytime to just jump in. Brain development starts out, and I'll send this as well in the handout. There's some very helpful diagrams that kind of helps us see how the brain development works, starting from infancy and then up through. We know that the brain doesn't fully develop until someone's in their early 20s, but the brain starts its development within the brainstem, which is the survival focus of our brain. Its underlying need is for safety, and if our environment feels unsafe, then we have a subconscious response. That fight or flight is the most common response that's been discussed in the past. There are also some other responses as well that people tend to have subconsciously to those situations that they're experiencing. But the underlying issue with the brainstem is it's totally based on survival, it's subconscious, and it's, am I safe? That's the question that the brain is trying to answer is, am I safe? How do I get to a position of being safe? How do I need to react to this situation so that I can be safe? So maybe it means aggression, maybe it means avoidance or numbing. It might mean just completely freezing in a situation, or it might mean trying to pander to someone, or to tone down a situation by avoiding an aggressor, especially someone that you live with. If you're living with somebody, it's a domestic violence situation, somebody's volatile, there's a fawning response that's also part of that survival mechanism as well. The next stage of healthy brain development comes into the limbic system, and it's determined by attachment, and it focuses on relationship. So especially as a child develops, as a baby develops, that attachment with that caregiver and healthy attachment models happen during that early development as in childhood as well. And it's focused on emotional development, the need at this stage, moving beyond safety to love and trust. Am I loved? Can I trust the people that are around me? Can I trust my caregivers? And this is where I think trauma can have some of the most substantial impacts to children with attachment and with trust. If they don't feel that their parents or their primary caregivers are people that they can trust, then that can certainly cause lots of future spiraling into just working through some of the attachment process when they were younger. Finally, the last stage of development is cognitive development. It's the most mature portion of our brain, the cortex, the neocortex, the prefrontal lobe. Those aspects of our brain that are responsible for decision making is that final development phase. Our cognitive brain that's capable of thinking logically, rationally, so that we can learn and make thoughtful decisions. So as the brain develops in a healthy way, we have that need for survival. We answer that question, am I safe? And then we can move into, am I loved? Am I gaining the trust, the attachment that I need to be healthy emotionally? And then finally, I can think cognitively about a situation. I can work through decision making. I can problem solve. And as long as we're in a calm state, we can function at that top level, at cognitive position. But once we start experiencing stress, our brain pushes back down into those development areas. So it follows that regression back down from a state of calm, where we're in a calm cognitive state. We can think clearly. We're able to rationally be proactive about our decision making. We're able to function logically. If we become heightened and we're in a state of alert, then we start moving back downwards into that emotional state. We become a little bit agitated. We're a little bit more cautious. We're more aware of our situation. And we're not able to then function as cognitively as we could before when we were in a state of calm. And let's say that alert then becomes validated. There's some kind of trigger. We were alerted to something that might feel somewhat unsafe, and then something triggered us to be alarmed and to move even further down that ladder. Now we're moving back down to that question of, am I loved, and almost getting into that, am I safe? Can I trust my situation? Can I trust my surroundings? That's the question that our brain is asking. And so we respond very emotionally then at that point. Fear starts to creep in. If you're at home and you hear a sound, you may be alerted to something. But if you see movement outside your window, now all of a sudden you're in a position of maybe of alarm, and you start responding very physically, very somatically, and you end up starting to respond emotionally to what's around you. You start getting anxious, somewhat afraid. But then let's say you hear someone at your door. You hear your door rattling, you hear a window break. Now all of a sudden you've moved down into terror or fear because there's a real threat that you're facing now. And so at that point, you react to the situation that's going on. You're not able to think logically anymore. Your body is just responding in a survival response. So you move into that fight, flight, or freeze at that point. Most likely in that case, fight or flight, as you're responding to a physical threat that's nearby. So one thing that's very important as we experience stress is that our thinking brain and our survival brain can't function together at the same time. Our brain moves its center of thought or center of action from one position to the other. So we move from the cognitive brain to the limbic system and then to the brainstem. And if we're operating at that survival level, our cognitive brain isn't functioning. We're not able to think because our brain is devoting all of its energy to survival. Well, as we consider the kinds of stressors that people are experiencing, many of the people that we are working with have significant stressors in their lives right now. They're not in a state of calm because they're coming to us because they've experienced some kind of stress. They're housing stress. They may be unstably housed. They may be completely homeless. They may not have a job, or they may need to get a job. Their finances are struggling. There are lots of presenting needs that they may come with that are based on stress. Not to mention, right now, our current just cultural experience is one where everybody is at least mildly stressed at any given point in time. So those stress factors are already present. We know that people are stressed. The other integration or intersection between stress and trauma is that when someone has experienced trauma and they're experiencing those ongoing effects of trauma as an adult, they're not able to function in a state of calm like someone who is more neurotypical that hasn't experienced trauma or hasn't had those lasting effects of trauma. PTSD is maybe a good example of this that most of us are familiar with. Someone who's diagnosed with PTSD may be in a heightened state of alert all the time, so that a loud noise will immediately trigger them into a state of alarm. They're not ever really at a state of calm because they're always a little bit on edge as to what's going on around them, because their brain has kind of locked itself into that survival mode, so to speak. So many of our clients, they may never actually achieve that level of calm that allows them to think cognitively if they're under stress on a regular basis. They may be pushed down into a constant state of just living in that alert response. And so as coaches, we're probably in more of a calm place. We should be more capable of that. That allows us to function better. And that's kind of how we tend to live our everyday lives. We have stress experiences at times that we go through, but for the most part, we're able to then regulate back to being emotionally calm. But our clients aren't always that way. And so we may be interacting with them in a way where there's a difference. They're at alert or alarm, and we're over here at calm, but we're expecting that they're meeting us where we are, because we don't know what's going on under the surface. We don't know what they've experienced. We may know a little bit about their stories, but when we're just interacting with them, they seem okay. Things seem fine. We've talked to them on the phone. We've met them in person. possibly. And so we, from all appearances on the outside, it may seem as if everything is okay. But if we're aware of the fact that they probably are in that state of alert on a constant basis, and that whatever stressors they're experiencing is just pushing that stress response to go a little bit deeper, then we can be more empathetic to their situation and be more aware of how that's going to impact our coaching with them, or our interactions with them as we try to help them. So the only way to then get to a place where we can think cognitively or think clearly about a situation, to face, you know, as coaches, a lot of times we're focused on goal setting. We focus on thinking through decision making. What's that next step that we're wanting someone to take? Well, in order to get to the place where they can feel comfortable and even be capable of thinking clearly about that next step, is if they've addressed those other underlying questions. Am I safe? Am I loved? And then finally, what can I learn? Because they've moved from that position of fear and needing to be safe to then that need for attachment, that need for emotional connection. Can I trust you? Am I loved? Am I cared for? And then finally, once those needs are met, they can eventually come to that place then of saying, okay, now I'm ready to think clearly. Now I'm ready to learn. Now I'm ready to engage, and I can actually think not just about what's happening today and how I'm going to survive, but about my long-term outlooks and plans for next week, plans for next month, you know, on and on from there. If you're familiar, if you've heard of conscious discipline, it's a technique that uses this approach to trauma for working with kids, raising kids, parenting, classroom teaching, because these are all skills that are important as well when it comes to working with kids that are going through those kind of stressors. Instead of just writing someone off as just having, you know, negative behavior, it helps kind of understand where's that behavior coming from and how can we work with them to get to a place where they can learn and respond. The 3 R's of recognizing the state are helpful. Again, I'll also have this on the PowerPoint handout that I sent out to you. The 3 R's are regulate, relate, and reason. And that's the strategy. If we know the state that a person's in, if we know that they're feeling unsafe, they're dysregulated, they seem like that they're anxious, maybe they're experiencing a panic attack, or they're maybe they just break down and cry over a situation that seems like it's maybe out of the ordinary, or maybe an excessive response to their situation, or simply just having an emotional reaction as we're working with them. That's a flag to say this person might be dysregulated. How can we help them regulate? How can we help calm them emotionally in order to move forward with our coaching process, instead of just feeling uncomfortable and awkward and allowing that to pass and just not knowing what to do about it? There are some things that we can help them achieve that calm, or achieve that regulation. One of the most important things is to avoid co-dysregulation. And what that means is that we react to what they're presenting to us. And I think this happens most often. I don't know that there are coaching situations or interactions that we have with clients where, you know, client's angry and upset and belligerent, and so we match that. That's not necessarily happening. But what I've noticed that I've done unconsciously at times is I look at a client's, you know, referral notes, and I see, okay, this is where this person is coming from, and I make a prejudgment about their situation and how I can help them before I even talk with them. And that happened once last week as I was working through this, and it was really convicting for me to step back and say, hey, hold on a second. What am I really doing here? How do I need to work with this person? How can I just listen to them, let them feel understood and heard, so that regardless of whether or not I may not be able to help them. In their case, the income level was low enough. There wasn't much that I could do to find housing at the time, but I can at least be a caring person that they can talk to, that can provide an atmosphere of safety, love, and trust and acceptance. And then we can work with them on helping to strategize about other things. But I immediately just went to not really knowing what I could do to help them, and feeling that personally kind of a sense of, I don't know if I would call it failure, but at least a sense that I don't know what to do. I don't know how to actually help in this situation. So I'm just jumping to some of the problem solving ideas and asking direct questions about their background without really building that atmosphere of trust and acceptance. And so that was an example that I went through, and I think that that's something that probably happens often, where we're not necessarily trying to, we're not getting angry with clients, but we may just not be aware or sensitive or empathetic to where they're coming from, and we may just jump to that place of just trying to problem solve without trying to build that atmosphere of trust. And that's really the second step with regulation, helping them to achieve a state of calm. That can be tough to do. That may be something that may need to just reschedule for another time, or that's always a possibility if you just don't think that they're gonna, or just take that first conversation and just use it as a chance to talk through things with the person and learn about their experience instead of trying to get to a place of coaching right then and there. If you have techniques that have worked for you to help you with your own emotional regulation, to help you stay calm, praying for them is also a great option. Just stopping and praying for their situation. I like to use the serenity prayer because it's just very familiar to a lot of people, and it is a good reminder that God give us peace, give us wisdom, give us courage. It's really simple and focused. We're not trying to just necessarily go through a laundry list of requests. We're just simply asking God for those three things, and that can also help with the regulation side of things. Relating then, I kind of already stepped into that some, but that's when we are trying to connect and reinforce attachment and trust. We're validating the emotions and the experiences that someone is going through. We're acknowledging what they've gone through or what's going on in their life. Just saying, I can't imagine how hard that must have been for you, or man, you've been through a lot lately. Those kind of simple statements. It's not that you have to connect on every single thing, but it's simply validating what they've gone through, of course, without patronizing them, but validating their experiences. And then once we're able to help them move through each of those states, then we can come to the reason state where they're ready and capable. They have the skills now to think clearly and rationally about their situation instead of reacting to what they're going through. So let me go ahead and just stop there. Any questions so far? Okay. So as we look at being trauma informed as coaches, our goal, and I do want to emphasize this, is not to help someone process the trauma that they've gone through in the past, or to determine if their experience was traumatic. That's not our job. We're not therapists, we're coaches. We don't want to re-traumatize people, and oftentimes we won't even know that they've gone through trauma. We just see the reactions. We see that tip of the iceberg of what's going on in their life right now. And so we can be trauma informed without even knowing exactly what they've gone through before. We can just get a sense that, well, it's very likely that the reason why they reacted to me the way that they did, or talked about this in the way that they have, or the reason why they're upset, they probably have had some kind of trauma in their background. And it's not something to take personally as a coach. It's something simply to be aware of, and sometimes we might help them regulate, but more often we're probably focusing on that relational side of things, where we're helping them to feel that they can trust us, that they're loved, that they're cared for. If there's anything else that we as Love Inc. can do, I think that focusing on helping people feel loved is a great place to start. So again, we're not trying to help them process that trauma. If something does come out, I do encourage you to contact a service coordinator or myself, and we have referrals that we can offer for therapy. Some people have caseworkers through Burl or Compass or other services as well that are also trained. And I do encourage you to send them there if something does come up, or send them back to us, but let's get other professionals involved as well, instead of trying to process through that trauma. Because if we do it carelessly, if we're not experienced and skilled at helping someone process trauma, all we're really doing is causing re-traumatization, because oftentimes that memory of trauma that comes back feels exactly the same to the person as the experience that when it first occurred. And so that's something we want to be very, very careful of. We're not trying to process it. We're simply trying to be aware that it's present, that they're experiencing that in their life. And so we can be educated and skilled in the way that we work with them moving forward. Something else that I think trauma helps us to keep in mind is, and a phrase that we like to use often, is that we want to assume that each person is doing the best they can with what they have. Unfortunately, trauma reduces their skill set significantly. The experiences they've gone through reduces that skill set. They don't have some of the opportunities and skills that we might have if we haven't experienced trauma, and if life has relatively gone the direction that we had planned for it to throughout the years. So our focus in coaching, if we're assuming that trauma has removed some of the skills that they could have, that they're doing the best they can, then we can respond not in a sense of, well, what happened to you and how can we fix it, but what was your experience and how can I empathize with you as we move forward? It helps us really have a context of empathy as we work with people, because that's often been something that I'll step back from if I've had a difficult client that I've worked with. Just kind of that reminder, are they doing the best they can? Well, I assume that they are. So what's the breakdown? The breakdown isn't that they're not wanting to do what's best for themselves. The breakdown isn't necessarily that I'm not getting through to them. The breakdown is that there may be a deeper issue here that's beyond what any of us can really handle right now. And maybe we need to involve other people in this situation in order for them to help take the next step that they need to take. And that takes the pressure off of me as a coach, because then it's not about me beating my head against the wall that they're not actually responding in what seems like their best interests. It's, well, how can I help them have more capacity? How can I give them more to work with so that they can do even better next time? How can we help them achieve some skills that will allow them to be in a place where their best next month is better than where their best was this past month? That's kind of what we're looking at there with that assumption. Coaching will often reveal or uncover a lot of our implicit biases. We're working with people that are different from us in a lot of respects, whether it's socioeconomic status, family dynamics, race, religious background, life experiences, education. There are lots of things that may be different. And we will discover that we have some implicit biases, whether or not we're not necessarily meaning to. It's unintentional, it's implicit, but it's there, and it helps to uncover that. And so as we remind ourselves that they're doing the best they can with what they have, that helps us, again, to build empathy, to avoid an imbalanced coaching relationship where we're the experts and we're trying to help them come up to our standard of living. Instead, we want to just lay a foundation for a safe and supportive coaching environment so that they can take the steps that they need to reach the goals that they have for themselves. So I want to finish with looking at 5 different areas of trauma-informed coaching. These are the 5 principles of trauma-informed anything. So if you've done any work in trauma before, or you're familiar with the trauma-informed perspective, these 5 points are going to be common, but I want to look at how we can apply those to our coaching situations too. So those 5 aspects are safety, trust, choice, collaboration, and empowerment. And safety seems like it should be assumed, but safety means that a client must be in a safer environment and the coach must be a safe person. In order for a coach to be a safe person, we need to be calm before the coaching appointment. There are plenty of times where we have stuff going on in our lives and we may be dysregulated ourselves. We may need to take some time. And this is maybe less likely for you as volunteers, although it's there. For me, if I'm seeing people back to back to back and I've had some other stuff going on during the day, I'll often have to step out for a second or just take a break, just so that I can kind of get back to a place where I feel like I'm calm and able to work well with the client. As a volunteer though, looking at your schedule, maybe if you've had a busy day at work and you're trying to manage things at home and then you're trying to fit in a client You may just need to be aware of your situation. Am I really able to give the client my best and to be emotionally calm so that I can help them feel safe and calm and achieve that state that we want to achieve as well. Even the location where you meet can inspire safety or it could trigger anxiety, so be aware of that. Oftentimes what I've experienced so far is that being able to talk with people on the phone puts them in complete control. They don't have to come here. There's no power distance between us and them. It means that we can't get as much accomplished physically as we might like to, but it is a very safe place because they can be wherever they want to be. If you meet publicly, that's also, fine. We certainly don't discourage that at all, and we look forward to the chance to meet more clients in person as well. But just be aware that the environment you meet should be a safe place. One maybe obvious example is that your first meeting with a client, you're not going to invite them into your home. That would be, potentially threatening. Maybe a public place, a coffee shop, outside, somewhere where they can, feel like that they don't have to be stuck. If they need to get away, they can get away. If it doesn't feel like it's going to go well, and it's not saying that we're assuming it's not going to. It's simply helping to foster that atmosphere of trust and safety as we're sensitive to what a client may be experiencing. Also with safety, avoiding re-traumatization. We've already discussed that a little bit. If they just practicing empathy and not digging into a situation if they do bring up past trauma. Trust involves setting clear expectations for the coaching process. So laying out what to expect. What is this going to be like? What are we going to do? Maybe that's in your first phone call as you reach out to a client to let them know what to expect. They've probably already had 2 or 3 other conversations so far. One with our clearinghouse, so they talk with Megan, one with the service coordinator, possibly also one with me as well, and then or with Kelly, and then as you meet them. But it never hurts just to reinforce, this is what this is going to look like. This is what our coaching process is going to be. These are the steps we're going to take. These are the objectives that we're trying to accomplish, and some boundaries. Maybe you're comfortable giving them your cell phone number, but maybe setting some boundaries even as to when they text, when they call, how are you responding to that? What hours are you available? Setting some clear boundaries for that relationship as well. Follow through with what you say you'll do, and be careful not to promise anything that's outside of your control. So when it comes to an appointment, just making sure that you follow through. If you have to miss an appointment, treat them professionally. Let them know ahead of time that you're not going to be able to make it and plan on rescheduling. Try to give them a day in advance. The same kind of courtesy you would appreciate, extend that to them as well if something has to change. Also, just in the way that we might try to encourage them, being careful about what we communicate. For instance, if we say something like, well, I know you're going to get that job. You've worked hard for it. Your application looks great. We've done a lot of preparation. I know you're going to get that job. Well, that sounds like positive thinking, but it can also set someone up for further rejection. So instead, maybe thinking along something like encouragement around who they are, what they've accomplished to get to the point of landing the job interview. Focus on the things that are within their control that they've been able to improve on, or skills they've been able to gain, as opposed to hopefulness for a positive outcome. Choice next. We want to allow choice in meeting times and methods as much as possible. We want to work with, as volunteers, I know that your time can be limited and you don't necessarily have enough availability to just say, whatever you want to do, that's fine. We'll just meet whenever you can. That's not the point here so much. It's just allowing the client to have ownership over when you meet and what kind of method works best for them. You may prefer to meet in person, but they just don't really feel comfortable with that. Don't push it. Let them kind of dictate what kind of methods work within the boundaries, of course, within the parameters. Same thing with meeting times. Let them choose something that works best for them instead of offering what works best for you. And I know that's something that's really hard to work around, because we're always focusing on our own schedules and what works best for us. How can we fit in all the things that we want to accomplish? But if we can step back and say, well, what's best for your schedule? What works best for you? And then here's what I have to offer that'll fit within that. It simply gives the client a little bit of control and choice. And trauma oftentimes takes away someone's sense of control. It removes their feeling of any kind of agency or ownership or choice, and they've simply become a victim of the circumstances or person or whatever happened to them, the experiences that they went through. And so choice helps to just slowly rebuild that trust and that sense of agency and ownership over their lives. And something as small as just choosing when to meet or where to meet or how to move forward can be huge in reinforcing that with them. Also, letting them choose the goals that they set for themselves. Each person is an expert on his or her own life. And as much as we think that we know what's best for them or we know what's best in a particular situation, we might not necessarily be paternalistic and say, I know what's best for you and this is what you need to do. But we probably have something in the back of our mind that, wow, this seems like this is the perfect fit. This seems like this is the right place for you to be, the right job, or the right housing situation to look at, or this seems like a great step to take in your budgeting process. But let them have ownership over that. Let them choose what they're doing there. You can certainly guide them. You can lay out what those next step options are, but be careful about taking away their sense of choice by only giving them the option to choose what you think is best, or setting that goal ahead of time for them. Like, hey, I found this job opportunity. This would be perfect for you. You know, step back a little bit and talk with them through it. Like, I found this job opportunity. I think it seems like a good fit, but what do you think about this? What do you think it's going to work? Do you have any hesitations? Any questions about that we could talk through, and then maybe work towards that step of then applying for the job or taking that next step. We also have some situations that are kind of challenging where we know what someone, housing is one, where we know what someone's income level is, and we know what possible places there are that we might have accessible to them. And yet we tend to just start looking at things, I do anyway, at times, it's this kind of problem solving. Okay, you're making this much money, rent is this landlord will probably take you, so apply over here. I'm like, well, I don't really want to live in that area. And allowing them to have that sense of agency as well to say, what would I feel like in their shoes? Would I want to live there? Is that where I want to raise my family? Is that the kind of job that I want to do? Is that the budget balancing step that I would want to take? Those are kind of questions that can help us practice empathy with our clients as well, to say, well, if I were in their shoes, how would I feel about this suggestion or this goal? And letting them have, again, ownership or agency in that decision-making process. And it might mean that they still have to come around to saying, wow, I have this limitation. I don't have the income that I need to be where I want to be. Or I don't have the skills to land the job that I want to land. But if you let them come to that place on their own, instead of forcing it on them or directing them to it, then that's their decision and they're going to have a lot more ownership in it over the long run. Collaboration is kind of tied to choice, but it's the idea that we're not looking to do to or for our clients, but we're looking to do with them. We're walking alongside them. And again, I think coaching is a great example of this, because we're not really in a position where there's a big power difference. We can just come alongside them as a coach, as a guide, and we don't necessarily, we kind of have a natural collaborative role already as coaches. Now, there are going to be some situations where a client is overwhelmed by their circumstances. They've had so much stress going on. Especially if they're unstable in their housing and they've lost their job, their income is struggling, they're behind on their rent. There's so much stress that's happening right there. They don't know what the best next step is to take, and they can't even think clearly about how to figure out what that should be. They're thinking about, well, how do I get food on the table tonight? They're not thinking about, how do I make sure I pay my rent so that I don't get evicted next month? So in some situations, we may need to step in and help them sort out what that next step is, and maybe even hold their hand a little bit, walk with them on taking that next step, but we're not doing it for them, we're still doing it with them. But it doesn't mean that we necessarily just step back and say, okay, here's all your options, figure it out. And it's walking with them and helping them navigate some of those things along the way. Also involving other resources and services. It's quite possible in the kind of work that we do to develop somewhat of a messiah complex, that we like being relied upon. We like being a person that can help somebody else out. It feels good. It's fulfilling to help someone, accomplish the goals that they have for themselves and to get to a better place in their life. But involving other agencies and services, other people, churches, whatever networks are available, helps to avoid that messiah complex, so that we continue to do this for the right reasons and not just because it helps us feel good about ourselves, because that then becomes a recipe for disaster. We do start creating a situation where we might end up re-traumatizing someone down the road. Finally, empowerment, and this kind of ties in a few of those other aspects, but helping someone to identify their strengths and their skills. In career coaching, one major aspect of empowerment is building a resume for somebody. It lets them see that they've had success in the past. They have some skills that they've learned over time. There are things that they can do that are valuable. And so that building that resume is not just a means to an end of getting a job, it's also a method of empowerment. I often emphasize budget coaching as an opportunity to gain control of their finances and to set their own priorities for how they spend their money. It's not just you have enough money to pay your bills, it's we're going to help you get control over your finances, so you're not just reacting to these bills that are coming in, but you can prioritize where you want your money to go. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to say, yeah, it's okay to prioritize lottery tickets over paying your rent, but it's helping them understand, like, how did I get to where I am? What priorities do I currently have? And how can I change my priorities if I need to, in order to be where I want to be and to get where I want to go. Communicate realistic optimism about a person's ability to achieve their goals. It's okay to be optimistic, but again, be realistic. Don't just jump to that idea that, well, I know this is all going to work out, but be realistically optimistic about where they can head, what they can accomplish. Where could they be if they start taking some of these steps? Extra Mile is a great example here. If you start taking some of these steps, where might you be 16 weeks from now? Where could you be in a year as you start making progress like this? You're not going to be a millionaire, but how can you have better control of your finances, and what might that outlook actually look like down the road? Also, invite, again, and this is going to sound redundant, but it's so imperative, invite their voice and their decision-making throughout the coaching process. Ask them how you can best help them or how you can work with them. Let them set those goals, or even set the trajectory for your time together. Again, it can be really easy to look at somebody on paper if you have somebody that's been referred to you and to assume that you know what they need, but take the time to give them a voice and to explain their situation and to talk with you through what they think or where they want to go, what they think is the right path forward for them. Again, trauma tends to take away someone's voice. It takes away their decision making. They feel as if they don't have any kind of power. And so as we can empower them along the way, we can help them gain resiliency as they move forward. And so we're not just helping someone get a job or helping someone balance their budget. We're actually helping them become resilient and to gain life skills that will serve them down the road to be more emotionally stable and healthy.
Amen.
Well, that covers everything I've got. Any questions about any of those principles or anything so far?
I don't have a question, Conrad, but this is Julie, and thank you for sharing everything you did today. I think, sometimes it's hard not to take personally when a person chooses not to. The thing that really resonated with me, what you said about don't expect somebody to choose what you're presenting to them. And, just in the long road, what I've seen is I think sometimes people may not choose the choice that I would recommend, but the tools that are offered are often the thing that is the most helpful to them, or the the resources and tools are the most helpful in that relationship.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't have any numbers on this, but the number of people that I've done housing coaching with that have actually landed a place that I suggested is pretty low. But the number of people that are housed through our coaching is really high. So, I've sometimes stepped back and think like, man, it'd be nice if something actually worked out sometime that I suggested. But it's that process of just walking with them and having a champion, having somebody that's alongside them. And it happens for job coaching and other things too, where they may not even choose what we were able to help them find, but the process of empathizing with them and giving them those tools and skills makes a difference.
And it might connect them to something that gets them to an even better place. We're just a connector, right?
Right. Anybody else?
This has really been good information. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. One situation that I've been dealing with, I know this was a client that I'm working with, is that, you know, I think when you work with somebody for a while, you start to see some patterns in terms of how they handle their stress.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you can pick up on that, then it's easier to understand, because one of the things I'm learning about my client is that whenever she gets too stressed or nervous, she'll tend to just back out of whatever she's doing. And like if she's getting help with getting her car fixed, she'll tell the person, oh, I don't need it fixed anymore. You know, I don't need it. But I think it's just a coping mechanism when she gets too stressed to just back up or run or hide or whatever, you know? Yeah. And so then I'm finding that a lot of times if I contact her and we talk her out, if she can talk it out, then she's like, oh, okay, I'll get my car. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
When she sees there's a way to do it, like I think, oh, she's not going to get her car fixed now. What are we going to do? You know, she's going to be stuck. But then when we talk it through, then she's like, oh, okay, I'll call them. I'll do that. So
Sounds like she just needs help breaking it up in small pieces and steps.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I think, oh no, this is really going to not be good. But then we talk about it and she's ready to move on, you know? Yeah.
And that connection that you fostered, I think, makes a difference too, where you're helping to answer that question of, am I loved, and kind of bring her back to that place of calm, you know, because she can trust you. You're helping her work through it. You're helping to mitigate the stress that she's experiencing. And so it's not even about the actual decision. It's about just how she feels through the process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think we see that with some clients that it looks like self-sabotaging, where Justine and I have talked about somebody that it seemed like that every job they were offered, they turned down. And there's a sense of control that there's an unknown here, and there's a lot of stress in something that's unknown. And we may look at it and say, well, this fits you perfectly, you're fine. But especially if they have a trauma background and they haven't had control, being able to reject something or to back out of something is a means of control. So again, helping them to feel like that they can be safe, to walk them through it, even help them understand what are the things you might be afraid of about this, or what's stressing you out about the situation, and walking through that to get to it.
Yeah, because it does kind of look like when that happens a little bit like self-sabotage. Like I think I'm thinking that's what she's doing, but then that doesn't turn out to be the case. And then she'll actually say to me, when I just get so stressed out, I just want to like not deal with any of it and just quit, and, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And helping people not quit is so huge. That's, I think, one of the best things we can do for people. So if they've always had a history of just quitting when they just got overwhelmed, the more times we can help them press past that. I've just seen it have incredible results for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really see us as perseverance coaches.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly. That's a great way to put it. We need to put that in our coaching manual.
Right.
I don't even suggest they're going to get a job they interview for. I just say, man, your perseverance is awesome. You know, whether we get this or not, let's go on, let's go. Every experience is awesome that you go through. And this little client that, you know, turned down, I don't know, maybe 5 jobs. And these were jobs that she pinpointed. Okay, the nature of the work she pinpointed. So it's a little throwing, but look at the power. Speaking of empowerment, look at the power she felt being wanted, period, being wanted by more than one job, and then being able to say, no, I think I'll keep looking, thank you, until I fit something. Wow, you know, I thought that's super empowerment. But I loved how, is it Mary Jane? Clark?
Just Mary.
Oh, Mary, I loved how you changed your pace with your client. You matched her pace. You learned about her processing, and then you matched her pace, slowed her down, and then you're role modeling. So you're allowing her what Conrad just taught us, to listen, walk, let them process their emotions the way they normally have in fight, flight. And then you suggested or even asked questions or whatever, you role modeled through your walking with her, what could be another option next time.
Mhm.
So I love that. I love how she trusts you. And oh, I'm frazzled. You know, I got to quit all this. I mean, I get like that. If I get overwhelmed, I start shutting down stuff. So, but I loved how you stayed with her. You let her say, you know, I'm out of it. And then you just calmly asked some reality. You got to right back down to reality. I just thought that was beautiful processing. But I really feel we're perseverance coaches. No, I mean, they're going through all kinds of stuff besides jobs.
And I feel like, you know, I have no idea what she's been through. I really don't.
Yeah, I don't either.
You know, because she hasn't really shared. And so I just feel like there's probably a lot there. Yeah.
And I don't even know if I want to share. You know, sometimes they do.
Right.
Some, no thanks, you know. I've done that enough.
I mean, working with love in clients just gives you a whole nother definition to the word setback. I mean, so many people in poverty experience so many setbacks. You know, the office was closed, they needed to go. The car broke down, they didn't have gas, they ran out of phone minutes. I mean, I can just see so often how they just can't handle one more. But they've already handled a million more than I've ever faced in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just us coming in with even just the energy, like you said, to be a perseverance coach, I really love that. And then right now, you know, we really have to be so aware of the toll of COVID-19. I read some Kaiser Foundation statistics, somebody emailed me over the weekend that prior to the pandemic, 35% of Americans reported having a mental health concern. Now 53% are reporting that.
I believe that.
Yeah.
So they're expert jugglers anyway,
Yeah.
Right.
no matter what, over us. See,
Yeah.
so when they pick the ball,
Have Jane, have any of our clients gotten COVID? Has anyone?
I think we've had maybe, not really, honestly. I'm trying to think if anybody has.
I had one
One
back in
positive,
April, yeah.
but nobody's seriously ill by any means. And honestly, I think even across the country, there's been a astonishment that the homeless population that everybody was so worried about has, for the most part, not gotten it.
Yeah. Huh.
So
Yeah, that's real interesting.
maybe living
God's
outside
mercy.
can build up a lot of immunity. I don't know, you know.
And maybe just some of God's mercy.
Probably not gonna get COVID.
Maybe the stamina too. You know, we're talking resilience and stamina. This is a group, right? that has it.
I like Nancy.
Right.
I like your comment, Nancy. God's mercy.
Well,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
so
that is-
appreciate all this learning, and Conrad, it's so good, but as you work with Love Inc., or as I have since I retired in 2016, you just come to appreciate everything we have, that you have no clue what you had been given compared to what these people deal with and are so resilient in doing it. I just admire them.
Mhm. Yes.
Well, one small favor was the special ed kids still get to go to school.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
Nancy has an extra mile client with a special, very severely autistic student, and praise the Lord, he does get to go to school. So that's one small consolation with all these parents that are home.
Yeah.
Jane, do
Now,
you
so-
know if it's 2 days a week or full time?
I think it's 5 days a week.
Because when I called last week, the person who does the preschool scheduling, she was saying the special ed program is in their building. And I was asking her about what they were doing, and things change very fast. And at that point, she said it was going to be 2 days a week in person.
Okay.
And
well,
so I don't know if that's
just-
changed.
I don't know, yeah.
Lucretia's son goes to that.
Mhm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there was an
Well, I
article in
think-
the paper this morning about that, but I didn't see what
I
the
did,
five.
yeah, I gotta get the detail. I'm told that the autism classroom at Russell Elementary was 5 days, but that could change too.
Well, that's different because he goes to a different school, so maybe it's different. Yeah.
So, but we do need to be praying. Mary helped me work on a grant application a few weeks ago. So we have gotten $30,000 to help people with basic needs. So it's housing, rent, utilities, car repairs. So we're pretty excited about that, that we can use. We have to spend it, well, they'd like us to spend it by the end of the year. I mean, we could spend that very quickly, honestly, but we're really we're just so excited that we got this extra resource to help people. Because they're the homeless, I don't know if any of Christine Logston is on here or not, but our percentage of homeless people we're helping is way up. I think it's up to 36% of the people contacting us. And that's unheard of. So just more and more people really need help right now. So praise the Lord, he's given us some resources, and he's given us all of you. Thank you so much.